Today, Spectrum will pay a visit to Hawaii's most famous political cartoonist, Corky Trinidad. Making mischief with the leading personalities that make the news, Corky Trinidad will discuss his cartoons and his approach to world events. Then Spectrum looks at a Portuguese dance company called Folclórico de Camões. Here, members both young and old perform the traditional dances of Portugal, in step with rhythmic Portuguese music while dressed in native costumes of festive design. But first, Spectrum takes you to a bamboo forest where the mysterious flute music of shakuhachi is heard. Traditionally carved from bamboo, the shakuhachi flute is now created in glass by expert craftsman Bill Cooper. Here to play an ancient Japanese melody is Riley Lee.
The shakuhachi is an inblown flute of Japanese design. It has been a musical tradition in Japan for hundreds of years. I recently formed a society devoted to the art of playing the shakuhachi. We call ourselves Chikaho Ryu, which means the Organization for the Preservation of Bamboo. But not long after the Chikaho Ryu Society was formed, I was faced with a problem. The bamboo shakuhachis are made by master artisans in Japan. They are costly, especially for a beginner. The prices for a bamboo shakuhachi begin at $250 to $300. Then one day, a shakuhachi student of mine told me about Bill Cooper, who is a glass blower. After Bill had seen an example of an inblown flute, he felt challenged to try and make one out of glass. I became very interested. Bill gave it a test run, and after working out the bugs, we finally had a flute of acceptable quality for a price that was most appealing.
I was curious about the shakuhachi. I'd always wanted to take flute lessons, and was happy to see a society formed for just that purpose. I realized that the bamboo shakuhachi, a very fine instrument, was priced at a prohibitive level, at least for beginners like myself, and there are more novices than there are experienced shakuhachi players here in Hawaii. So I developed this idea about making glass flutes. I just used Pyrex glass tubes obtained from the Corning Corporation and began shaping them. The factory sends me glass tubing in the standard 4-foot length. I reduce that down to 2 feet. I begin the flute with its mouthpiece. Using a graphite tool, I'm able to ensure that the diameter of every flute is identical. With a measuring fixture, I determine the exact location of the finger stops as well as the final length of the total flute. I heat the tube at the measured finger stop location. Using a glass rod, I pull the molten glass up into a thin shaft, which may be easily broken off. Once the thin shaft is removed, a small opening is created. By heating this small opening and inserting a tool, it can be reamed to the exact diameter. A further refinement to the glass shakuhachi is to cut the mouthpiece at an angle similar to the one used on the bamboo shakuhachi. Then polishing is required. I like to fire polish the flute to eliminate superficial irregularities. When polishing with flame, an exacting degree of skill is necessary, or else the flute would melt into a formless lump. Just the surface of the flute is slightly melted. The resulting finish gives to the flute a look of smooth, polished glass. The jigs and fixtures are helpful, but without the necessary level of skill, the creation of a glass shakuhachi cannot be controlled.
One of the reasons I was pleased with the choice of glass for a flute is its high silica content. This makes for a very hard material, which has adequate resonance. I noticed that the interior bore of the bamboo shakuhachi was coated with lacquer. When hardened, lacquer is very similar to glass. I was attracted to the shakuhachi because of its tone quality and the complexity of sounds that it is able to produce. I spent 7 years in Japan learning to play the shakuhachi. The glass flute actually approaches the bamboo flute in tonal quality. It is no rival, but at least it surpasses the plastic flute.
Coming up on Spectrum is the Portuguese club Folclóricos de Camões. Now, Spectrum's executive producer, Nino J. Martin, visits with Corky Trinidad, the Honolulu Star Bulletin's political cartoonist.
Corky, you were born in the Philippines, and what was it about the Philippines and what did you do there to make you become a journalist and a political cartoonist?
My training was journalism. But my desire for cartooning started from childhood, I think. I have always been doing cartoons. Even when I was taking journalism as a vocation, I was doing cartoon on the side for a pastime. So I didn't set out to be a cartoonist.
But were you working in the Philippines as a cartoonist?
Yeah. After graduation, I still did cartoons. Cartoons sent me through college.
What made you decide to become a political cartoonist?
I've always loved political cartoons. Even when I was a little kid, I remember instead of collecting, drawings of Batman, Robin, and all that kind of Superman, I was collecting, I remember reprints of Newsweek and Time magazine political cartoons and putting them in, putting them in scrapbooks.
How much of the political scene in the Philippines affected you as a youngster to make you become a political cartoonist?
Oh, very much. First of all, the Philippines at the time, too, I can't say for now, the Philippines is really a very political country. First, families, clans, they all run the country, the oligarchy, so that everything, even social life and political life are really fused in one. So that growing up in an atmosphere where people naturally know the political implications of any act of anybody, I guess I acquired that first love for politics in the sense of what we call a miron, somebody who's looking, not as a politician.
Well, now, couldn't you have continued your career as a political cartoonist in the Philippines? Did you have to come to America? Did you want to? What brought you over here?
Well, first, what brought me to Hawaii was Hawaii. I was here in 1960, then 65, then 67, all passing through. And I've always wanted to live here. So that, and at the same time, by 66, my cartoon was syndicated in the mainland papers. And I was more really at ease with American politics more than
Did you disagree with the Philippine politics?
oh, a lot, yeah.
You did. So you just
I had
decided.
a real strong political cartoon when I was there.
Hmm.
But Philippine politics, see, at the time, the Philippine press was so free. Everything was so freewheeling, and I had two political cartoons at the time. One on the front page on local Philippine issues, then one in the editorial page on, and that was the one that was syndicated.
Well, how do you get your ideas, Corky?
I get my ideas from reading everything that's going on, and at first when you start doing the cartoon, it's a very journalistic decision. It's like a news desk deciding what's the best story for the day, that kind of thing. So on my own, I based on what's happening in the day, I decide what's the best, news of the day for the cartoon, that kind of thing. And then I think about it, analyze that particular news item, and come up with a concept about it. The best cartoon ideas come from a slant that you had decided upon. You have to take a stand. I think all the work is done in finding out what stand you should take on a particular item.
Do you find the people disagree with you?
Oh, a lot. Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
How about agree?
Oh, a lot too. I think
What's
you're
the
only good 50% of the time.
I see.
You take a specific case. If I do a cartoon today that seems to favor, let's say, the Democrats' position of a specific issue, the Republicans all think you're all wet and ignorant and should be kicked back to the Philippines. Now, the next day, if I do a cartoon on an issue that seems to agree with a Republican stand, all the Democrats will say, he's no good. The same Democrats who say that you're so great the day before will say you're no good today because, and should be kicked back to the Philippines. So I don't really try to, because most people have set stands. The Democrats have a set stand, the Republicans have set stand, and they cannot really understand a field of work or a person that actually comes in with every issue with no stand yet until he reads it and analyzes what stand that he has to take.
So you try to keep it as balanced as possible then?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you consider most of your cartoons negative? I mean, in the greater percentage, are they kind of a cynical look at a particular subject or a character?
Well, if that's the definition of negative, I would consider most of the cartoons negative. I don't think it's the cartoonist. It's not our job to praise, I think. All the politicians have flax enough for that. I mean, let's say President Reagan has millions of budget, has $1 million in his budget on an office that sets out to praise him to the media anyway. So that that's not my job. They have their own job for that. I think because we have only one space a day, our job is to look for the bad side. For as Bill Malden said, my job is if I see a staff shirt, I want to punch a hole in it. That I think it's nice to be able to do a praise cartoon and a critical cartoon at the same time, at the same day, on two instances. But if space allots you only one, I take the negative side.
Is a cartoonist like a poet in that he reaches below the everyday surface of things? Or do you generally look at the everyday things and talk about that? The subtleties.
I don't know about being a poet. The political cartoon is a very concise rhetorical argument, I think, more. That's what it is. It's just a rhetorical argument visually. If you look at the principles of cartooning, you'll find that it's really a visualization of all the principles of rhetoric. What they set out to do is to, in one instance, in 1 or 2 seconds, they want to convince you of a particular slant that they have in their own head. So where do you fall back on except rhetoric? While poetry seems to signify a more flowery way of looking at it, or a more aesthetic way of looking at things that looks for beauty. I think the two are just different in the approach.
Corky, when you first take a look at someone, so you're in a situation, you're in a room or cocktail party, whatever, you look at someone, when you first see them, what do you see?
First, I see the two ways to look at it of every people. It's the physical part, and then when I have an opinion on people, then that physical part becomes tempered by my opinion. So when I look at people the first time, I really look at all the physical of the face. In terms of caricature, I think, I admit it's becoming a bad habit because people think that I'm always staring at them or peering at them. but the first start of the caricature is to know really look at the physical part. We all see each other all the time, but in a matter-of-fact way. We don't really look. I don't think, if you get 10 people, I don't think 5 will really see how your nose goes down that way and then goes down that way, how your eyes are peering more than just dull, that kind of thing, while I do.
Often in cartoons, I notice that cartoonists tend to emphasize the defects in people. For example, if they have big jowls or bags under their eyes. What is it? Why is it that you do that?
It's really not emphasizing the bad parts. It's emphasizing the features that would help your general picture of the cartoon, your main idea of the cartoon, or the main face of the person. For example, you take President Carter. Everybody's seeing President Carter every day. Once he acquires this public face to people, there are actually parts of Carter that the people don't realize they had retained more than other parts. So that actually when we do a caricature of Carter, what the caricaturist does is not to say, I think I will look for Carter's faults and magnify it. What he's saying is, I wonder what in Carter's face has become etched in the memory of people. And that's the only thing that I will emphasize. Because as soon as I put this, people know it's Carter. That kind of. So it's not emphasizing. If you have let's say if you have a wart here, and it's really not part of your face. It's really not, it doesn't help in the remembrance of people about your face. I won't draw it.
Do you mind if I ask you to draw a cartoon for us? There's a situation a little while back where President Reagan gave his famous Star Wars speech, and our own Senator Danny Inouye did the Democratic rebuttal. And I'm wondering if perhaps you could characterize the two of them in a cartoon, with Inouye talking to Reagan about the speech that Reagan just gave.
Okay.
Could you draw that for us?
Okay. On the Star Wars thing.
On the Star Wars thing.
Well, first you have to decide on who's going to be Darth Vader. How does Darth Vader go? That kind of.
Who would you consider Darth Vader here?
Oh, well, the guy who wants to do all the Star Wars weapons,
All right, so that would be the president
Yeah.
in this case? So he would be taking off a Darth Vader mask.
Yeah, and let him hold it, see? So that then people will still recognize the Darth Vader thing, like that. make him recognize as soon as he takes off this futuristic weapon that it's Reagan inside or something.
Can we turn this around and look at it now? So here you have Senator Danny Noy with a sword talking to Ronald Reagan as Darth Vader taking off his mask, and here you've got futuristic weapons. And that's a quirky interpretation
I think
of,
I'm losing a lot of readers by these lousy drawings I'm doing.
Speaking of that, would you release something like this, or would you do something
Not yet,
different?
no.
In other words, you have
I
to work
a
it
rule.
out.
Yeah, I have a rule that, like something like this, usually I follow a personal rule of throwing away the first concept that comes into my mind. Because as soon as you do the first concept that comes into your mind, you have to assume that 113 other political cartoonists in the United States thought of the same concept. So I usually throw away the first idea.
Have you ever had a situation where another cartoonist did exactly what you did?
Oh yes, many times.
And what do you do in a case like that?
Nothing.
You just let it go?
Yeah, because sometimes I conceive of the very same idea as somebody in New York on the same day. Sometimes Conrad in LA Times, I get my LA Times late, 2 days late, and I see a cartoon that he did on the day that I did my cartoon on the very same subject, almost the same slant and idea, but different execution, of course.
How about the future, Corky? What do you see the future? You're going to be taking some of your talents on to some other media?
Yes, well, right now, I have a comic strip called Zeus, and I don't know if I should reveal it, but right now, it's being executed in animation form, see, by one of the animation firms in the mainland. So we plan to have it out by February, as first introduced as a... I don't do anything too. I just did the first drawings. They are doing the pilot. They're doing the storyboard. I think the medium of tomorrow is TV, even in cartooning.
Hawaii has always been known for its richness in ethnic heritage expressed through dance. For over 100 years, the Portuguese have contributed many traditions to the unique blend of cultures in Hawaii. Showing us a glimpse of those traditions through the music, instruments, dance, and costumes of Portugal is Josephine Carrera, Executive Director of Folclórico de Camões.
The first large group of immigrants came from Portugal in 1878. With them, they brought their traditions, their music and their dance and their musical instruments. From each province, there's a different type of music and a different type of dance and a different costume. I would like to show you now a costume from the Minho province in northern Portugal. Cindy is wearing a typical Minho costume. The vest is very ornate and it's hand embroidered. All women in Portugal wear shawls, and they wear it in a unique way. They pull it over their head in case it is too warm or it's raining. The embroidery goes all the way down to the bottom of her skirt and to her textured stockings down to the mules on her feet. In addition to the costumes and the dance and the music, the Portuguese introduced their instruments to Hawaii. One of the most important contributions, I think, to Hawaii that the Portuguese made was the cavaquinho. Mr. Nunes brought this on the Ravenscrag when he came in 1879. It was later renamed, as you all know, the ukulele. Another instrument that came with the Portuguese comes from the island of Madeira, where most of the immigrants first came. This instrument is called the brinquinho. The little dancers around in the ring here have the typical costume of Madeira. The little castanets, little blocks of wood here make the sound of the castanets in the back, and the little tambourine sound comes from the bottle caps right back here. And it is played by drawing down on the shaft like so. In order for us to maintain our traditions here in Hawaii, being that the immigrants did not come after 1913, we would have to perpetuate our culture by handing our dances and our music down through the generations. In 1974, we formed a club called the Camoens Players. We have two groups of dancers. The adults do dances from the islands of Azores, and they do traditional dances that were brought here 100 years ago. We formed a group of young people in 1976, and they do dances from all over Portugal, all throughout the 11 provinces and the islands as well. Now, wouldn't you like to see a dance from one of these provinces in the traditional costumes? The Folclórico de Camoens will do a dance from the Ribatejo area called the Fandango.
When we are caught up in an art form, time may vanish and our pleasure suspends us for a while. But it soon ends, and we long to return to it. We'll look for your return to our next Spectrum.